All right, seventh graders, this is your first lesson in the workbook, and it should be a lot of review. These were concepts that we went over at the beginning of the year, so just to start using the workbook, we're going to do some review in this, and we'll see how this goes. So, in getting the idea, I hope you all have read through the beginning paragraphs, but I'm just going to kind of annotate a little bit if anything confuses you, just to give you the information you might need. And they talk about a rate is a special kind of ratio. And we know that ratios, we can write them as fractions, just like this. In fraction form, we can also write, if we're using 100 to 2 as our ratio, we can also write them in two different ways. So we can write it out, so we can say 100 miles to 2 hours, just like that. Or we can also write it a third way using a colon. So 100 miles, colon, 2 hours. And I would read that 100 miles to 2 hours. Another word instead of to that we can be using is per. So 100 miles per 2 hours. Both of those will tell you to put those numbers in ratio form. And also, it's important to remember that the unit rate is just a rate per one of the measurements. So instead of our rate would be 100 miles to 2 hours, the unit rate would be that 50 miles to that 1 hour. It's important that that denominator, that second part of the ratio, is to one of our measurement being an hour here. And also a complex fraction. It has a description in the paragraph, but just to give you something visual that you can see, it would be a fraction that has a fraction either the numerator, denominator, or both. So a complex fraction could be 1/5 over 1/3. 1/5 over 1/3. You see, in our numerator we have a fraction, in our denominator there's a fraction. So that's a complex fraction. So we're going to move on to example 1. It says, Gracie practices the flute for 2/3 hour each day. Write this unit rate as a complex fraction. We know it's a unit rate because it says each day. 2/3 of an hour, she practices each day. That's for 1 day, she will practice 2/3 of an hour. It says, write this unit rate as a complex fraction. So we know it's going to be practice of hours per day, right? Because that's how it was set up in that sentence. Step 1 says identify the unit quantity. It will be the denominator. So the unit quantity is 1 day. We talked about that in the first sentence. Step 2 says identify the quantity for the numerator. The numerator is that practice of hours each day. So if we have a numerator, 2/3 hours per 1 day. So we already found our numerator, denominator. All we had to do was put it in 1. And it says that's our solution. Gracie's unit rate is 2/3 hour per day. We know it's unit rate because our denominator is 1 of our measurement. Example 2, we're moving on. Example 2 says a suggested planting rate for the wildflower seeds is 1/2 pound per 1/8 acre. What is the unit rate in pounds per acre? So we know that our numerator is going to be pounds, our denominator is going to be acre. All of these we're going to set up in fraction form just because that's the easiest to do. So I'm going to put my fraction here. And it is also important to notice that per, we hear that per, that means to divide. That gives us the idea that we're going to be dividing. So as soon as you see per, you say, oh, I'm going to set up as a fraction because we're dividing. That fraction bar tells us divide. So 1/2 pound per acre. What's the unit rate in pounds per acre? Acre's got to be our denominator because that's what we need a unit of. That's what we need 1 of. So let's just set up our ratio 1/2 pound to 1/8 acre. That is our step 1. Step 2 says rewrite the fraction so it has a denominator of 1. Well, you could follow this step, but the way we have learned in class and the way that I think might be easier for all the students to know is that since we have a fraction bar here that tells us to divide. So 1/2 pound divided by 1/8 acre. Step 3 would say write the unit rate as a fraction. Well, we're still on step 2. So we have 1/2 pound per 1/8 acre. And we know what to do when we have a fraction divided by a fraction. We can multiply by the reciprocal. Remember, keep, change, flip. Keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep the first, change our sign to multiplication, and flip our second, which is called the reciprocal. And I'll write that off to the side. When we flip it, it's called the reciprocal. So now we have 1/2 times 8 over 1. That's real easy. We just multiply across. 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. That can be simplified to 4 over 1. And remember, that's 4 pounds over 1 acre. So we just multiply by the reciprocal to get a fraction, and then simplified it to the unit rate. 4 pounds to 1 acre. That is our unit rate. That would be the answer. All right, and example 3 has Angelo read 1.5 pages in 3 minutes. Find his reading speed in pages per hour. So we know we need pages. We have pages here, so 1 1/2 pages per hours. So for 1 hour, we want one. We don't know how many hours is 1.5 pages, but we know our answer needs to have per 1 hour. But I'm not sure yet how many hours it takes him to read that. We know it takes him to read 3 minutes, but these are minutes. These are not hours. So we know what we have to do. Step 1, we need to change minutes to hours, because that is what our denominator needs to be. So we know that 3 minutes times 1 hour over 60 minutes. We know that this is really just multiplying by 1. It's just changing our minutes to hours. We know in 1 hour is 60 minutes. So we know that's just a factor of 1 here. So if we have 3 minutes times 1 hour over 60 minutes, which is, remember, just 1. And let me make sure that I have my labels. So I'm going to put 3 minutes, 1 hour, 60 minutes. 3 times 1 is 3. 1 times 60 is 60. So I have 3. I have both a minutes in the numerator and the denominator. So that means they can cancel out. And I'm left with hours on top. 3 hours. I'm sorry, 3 over 60 hours, because there's no other labels left. That will simplify to 1/20th of an hour. So 1/20th hours. Now we have pages and we have hours. Let's set up our ratio, because remember, we want minutes. We want pages per hour of his reading speed. So we have 1 1/2 pages in 1/20th of an hour. What we can do, we know that this is divided by symbol, and we can keep, change, flip, but I'm going to write that as a division symbol. So 1 1/2 pages, divided by 1/20th hours, and we can keep, change, flip. So we're going to keep the first one, 1 1/2 pages, change the sign, flip the second fraction. We can change that to a mixed number. So we have 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3 half pages, times 20 over 1 hours. And we have 3 times 20, 60, 2 times 1 is 2, 60 pages per hour, or 60 over 2 pages per hour, and that will simplify to 30 pages per hour. Okay, so we know how to set up a ratio, we know how to find the actual rate after the ratio in each of these 3 examples. At any time, if I'm going too fast, feel free to pause the video, rewind the video, because this will be on YouTube, so you'll have plenty of time to do that. And let's see if there's any other examples. Oh, and there's a coach example. So one last one before you guys can do the lesson practice. It took 2/3 minutes to find a barrel, or I'm sorry, it took 2/3 minutes to fill a barrel 1/4 full of water. Find the unit rate in barrels per minute. So we want barrels on top, minutes on bottom on our denominator, and we know we're dividing because of the per. So write the rate of barrels to minutes as a complex fraction. So we were told 2/3 minutes. You told me that minutes was going to be on the bottom, our denominator, to fill 1/4 of a barrel full of water. So 1/4 is that top. Rewrite the fraction, so it's a denominator 1. I'm going to rewrite this as a division problem because we know we can do that. So I have 1/4 divided by 2/3 minutes. Keep, change, flip. Keep the first one, change the sign, flip the latter. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. Remember, this is called a reciprocal when we flip it. So 3/8 barrels per minute. Barrels per minute. So the barrel is filled with water. Unit rate of 3/8 barrel per minute would be our answer. When we multiply across and get our answer, then 3/8 barrels per minute. I can write out per, or I can just do the slash for per as well. All right. In our lesson practice, remember to put all of your answers into Juno. They all have A, B, C, D, and they're all in order. They should not be mixed up. It should go right through all the way. If there is any extended response like this, I have changed some of these on Juno. They'll be listed in just the questions for the answers, say what to put online, but still fill in your whole workbook. If you fill in your whole workbook, what you put online will just be a part of the answer. Okay, so good luck. If you have any questions, message me on Jupiter. And I'll see you guys soon.